Back in October of 2021, Matt Clark and I had just recorded our 20th episode of the Branded by Amazing podcast. And the topic of that podcast was Thrasio. And in particular, what would happen if the entire aggregator model didn't work out? What if after investing billions of dollars buying up hundreds if not thousands of small businesses, people simply weren't willing to pay for them what they needed to get in order to give a return to their investors? Well, a few months later, when we were getting ready to publish that podcast, the news hit that Thrasio was starting to have massive layoffs and also switching out their CEO. At that point in time, a lot of the aggregators were facing the same issues. And clearly, the aggregator bubble was starting to burst. Now, since we knew a lot of the people that were being affected by this, and since it didn't seem right to release that podcast, we decided to hold on to it. But with the news hitting just today that Thrasio has officially filed for bankruptcy, we think it's time to finally release that podcast and see what we got right and what we got wrong. The following is that podcast that we recorded on October 12th, 2021. Check it out and let me know in the comments what you think, especially if our ideas on what they could do should this ever happen still hold true today.
Hey there, and welcome to Branded by Amazing. This is episode number 20, and today we're going to talk about what it means that billions and billions of dollars have flooded into the Amazon marketplace by big aggregators. This is Matt Clark, the CEO of Amazing.
I'm Mike McClary, the Chief Product Officer of Amazing.
We're kind of trying to work our way up to like predicting the future here, which obviously is not easy. I mean, what happens at the point where a company like Thrasio, and there's a lot of other ones, but they're kind of, I think, the biggest one, and so that's the one we talk about the most. There's other ones that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, which is still a ton of money. It's just they seem to be the biggest. And so what happens when nobody wants to buy their portfolio or a similar portfolio, where they have all these random kind of smaller businesses or smaller products that are doing well, and they're producing, like, in total, a lot of sales. But what happens if nobody wants to buy that portfolio? It's like, what are they going to do if they're just sort of sitting there stuck with this collection of thousands of random Amazon products? I don't know.
Yeah, they would have to very quickly go from either a business that's, buying up brands to one that's operating and running brands. I know they already have that in place. They have teams in place to run these brands because they can't afford to have them lose sales, lose market share. They have to keep them going and growing, they said. But I don't think their long-term play was to continue managing all these portfolios of thousands of products. They have to pretty quickly switch over to that model. Or, one thing I think we had mentioned is may they end up selling back some of these businesses to other people again, who are looking to for a smaller brand, because if no one's willing to spend billions and billions of dollars to buy these brands, maybe other people want to spend millions of dollars though to get into the game.
Yeah, I mean, they've got a lot of, very smart people there, but it seems very hard to manage so many different brands that are very small. It's like you take a company like Procter & Gamble, like they're managing brands that are like Tide, which is $1 billion plus brand. It's got however many products under Tide. I'm sure there's lots of them, but it's a $1 billion brand. It's not, a $3 million a year Amazon sort of company. And so it's like, but because they're all under different brands, they're not together. That means they have to manage all that stuff separately. It's likely a different even email address somebody emails if they ever want to contact that brand, a different website they have to manage, a different social media profile. All that stuff is different for every single brand. I mean, think about it. If you just want to make that brand a little better, you got to go out there and do a set of brand guidelines, for example, which we've been through before. I've done it with 2 businesses, and it's just one of those little small things. Now they're doing that for 1,000 different brands that none of them individually really add up to that much. I mean, maybe 1% do, are more significant, say, $20, $30 million a year plus. That seems like a nightmare, trying to manage that many small brands.
And one of the things we never knew back when people were starting to buy Amazon businesses were, do they buy the entire account, the seller account, or do they simply buy the brand and move that product over into an existing account? To me, if they were able to combine all these products and brands into maybe a handful of existing Amazon seller accounts, it's more manageable. Less people have to go into less accounts, log in all these different passwords, and they can manage that. But it's still a very logistical nightmare to go in and manage several accounts. But that's what they're doing. They're not moving them into just a handful of accounts. They're buying, not only the brands, they're buying individual accounts. So they have thousands of brands, each on their own individual Amazon seller account to manage as well. I mean, the only way you can do it is they must have software, I'm assuming. And we know that they're involved in software. But yeah, that, like you said, what a logistical nightmare to try to manage and grow those brands when you have all these different businesses set up.
Yeah. And the other thing that I wonder too is right now it seems like Amazon is very kind of keyword focused, like product centric, which I think is why their model is to go out there and buy these products that have, what they call a review moat, but basically more good reviews by a long margin than any competitors. It's like you see this all the time in some products. Like there'll be one product that has like 10,000 reviews, and the next best, say 3 competitors, all have like maybe 1,000. And then so they want that product with 10,000 because that gives them the most sustainable advantage on that product. It's probably going to sell the best and sell the best for a long time. But I mean, Amazon keeps unlocking more and more features for brands. And so what happens if the market becomes more brand centric? So now they have, these hundreds of separate brands where at some point there may be a reason why it would be better to have the trust built in a single brand. So rather than just some random product on some random brand nobody's ever heard of with a lot of reviews, at some point it may be more important to have a brand people actually recognize, even if you have less reviews.
Right.
More trustworthy, more stable. I mean, Amazon's brand pages now look amazing. They look almost as good as like a regular website. You have all that flexibility in there. And so that's another thing that I wonder, because if that model kind of switches, which is part of the risk, is they're kind of at the mercy of Amazon. But if that model and value kind of switches, like that could be devastating to those companies.
You're right. And Amazon has absolutely become more brand focused. If anyone who's selling right now, they now dedicated an entire menu option just to all the different features that brands have. There's brand experiments, there's special brand ads like sponsored headlines, sponsored brands ads. There's ways to actually communicate with customers via email. One thing that brands can do is email customers now on Amazon. For those who don't know that, that's like a new feature that's tied into their posts feature. They've also released for brands. There's ways to go out there, and the only way to communicate with people who give you bad reviews through the brand feature inside there. So they're definitely becoming more brand centric, whereas these aggregators are brand agnostic.
Yeah.
They're just looking at the total numbers, which, like I said, a lot of smart people there, I'm sure, are already thinking about this.
So definitely an interesting time to be involved in the space. But yeah, head over to amazing.com/branded. If you have any questions you want to ask us or any comments you have about this episode, we'd love to hear from you and hope to see you in the next episode.